Hi, and welcome to Mrs. L's Leveled Learning. In this tutorial, you're going to see how to use learning goals with scales in your classroom, which is different than just having a learning goal. Learning goals with scales involve breaking down every goal or standard that you have for your students into small, consecutive pieces that get increasingly more difficult until they reach or surpass the goal for their grade level. The materials you'll see in this presentation were developed in my own classroom, a multi-age classroom with students of varying abilities. Many of you may already be familiar with Robert Marzano's research in the art and science of teaching, a comprehensive framework for effective instruction. I was introduced to this material by my district through some professional development, and since we were switching over to a teacher evaluation system that required us to use learning goals and scales, I started trying to figure out how to streamline this process into my own classroom of multi-age students. Every teacher has a learning goal in mind when they teach a lesson or begin a unit or try to cover the standards. But having a learning goal, as you know, doesn't necessarily clarify how you're going to accomplish that or how your students are going to accomplish that. Tracking student progress with scales helps your students to have a concrete vision of where they're coming from, where they are, and where they're going. It helps them to take ownership over their learning, because they can see what's necessary for them to do the learning and how far along they've come. As you can see, Marzano cites that using learning goals and scales in your classroom has more influence over student achievement than any other teaching strategy you might use.
Presenting goals with scales helps your students make connections to what they've already learned and how they can apply that knowledge to their new learning. In each example, the standard stated at the top because that's the ultimate learning goal. The scale below it shows consecutive scales with increasing difficulty from 0 to 4. Marzano suggests that the scale 3 should be the grade level expectation, so this is the target for most of your students. Scale 4 would be advanced, and scales 1 and 2 should be based on prior knowledge, either from previous grade levels or sub-scales of the main goal. These examples of scales have been done for grades 3 through 8 in the Common Core Math Standards.
There are two ways to pre-assess your students and get an idea of where they're starting with a scale. You can informally assess them by observing their work on a new topic, or you can ask them, show me on your fingers, where do you think you are with this scale right now? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Some kids might say 0, and that's okay. In a pre-assessment, it doesn't matter where the student starts, because the point is they'll be showing all of their learning as they grow through each step in each scale. This 7th grade assessment, you can see how each subsection, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, have specific tasks assigned to them, so it's very obvious to me and the students whether or not they have mastered each level. I give my students as much time as they want to complete a pre-assessment because I really want to see how much they know and how far they can get. Students who know a lot will get credit for that and probably be able to skip some of the practice or instruction, maybe do an independent project. Students who need the extra time and help, I will know that from the very beginning and be able to plan accordingly. With pre-assessment, students don't have to be intimidated by what they don't know yet because they aren't graded for it. The scales or the assessment would be scored and recorded so students can see where they're starting from, which also makes their growth more obvious when they finally reach their goal. The pre-assessment results should be coded in some way for the teacher and students, and this is one of the forms that I used. It's a binder divider where the front side students can color in their pre-assessment score, 1, 2, 3, or 4, as far as they got. And on the back side, there's space for reflections and goal setting. This can be tailored to their individual strengths and weaknesses. Once I had my students' scores from the pre-assessments, and once they were able to review it and set some specific goals for themselves, I used those scores to differentiate their instruction and sort them into groups. This saved me a lot of time because the kids who already knew most of the material were able to move on and felt rewarded to do independent projects or things they were interested in, to advance in that subject, maybe move on to other grade level skills. And this was something that they could feel good about. The kids who needed my attention, I was able to plan for them specifically in the skills that they needed, so we wasted less class time working on everything with everyone. Planning small group work, homework, or class practice was much more clear and obvious to me because I'd already identified the skills that they needed to master that standard. Most tests that students take are designed to be pass or fail. The whole test presents material based on the grade level standard, and the student either knows it or doesn't. With these assessments, kids don't have as much anxiety because they already have some of it completed. When they took the pre-test, they were able to show what they already knew. The same test is used as the post-test after instruction is completed, however long you decide to teach a certain topic, so students can pick up where they left off. They feel rewarded because they don't have to do the whole test if they already knew a lot, and they can also see how much they've learned. Students are always excited to see their test results, and even students who didn't do quite as well as they wanted to will still be able to see some growth in their learning toward the goal. After the posted tests are given and graded, I always revisit the binder for students to see how they progressed in their goals and to complete more of the coloring spaces depending on how far they've gotten. This helps them again to visually track their progress, to affirm that they've made progress, and to have a concrete record of their progress. When we share these with parents or administrators, there are not a lot of questions. It's really obvious how a student's doing, specifically what skills they've mastered or haven't mastered, and where their grades are coming from. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this presentation. I hope you found it helpful. I've been amazed at the difference that tracking learning goals with scales can make in my students' performance and also their motivation. It's motivating for all of us to be able to see where we started and how far we've come. For students especially, making it concrete affirms that they are learning and making progress. If you'd like to try these materials out in your classroom, you can find free copies of the posters, assessments, and student portfolio pages for grades 3 through 8 by visiting Mrs. L's Leveled Learning blog or my store on teacherspayteachers.com.